Hello, everyone, and today with me, Professor Darla Deardorff. If you are watching this interview, this is because Darla is now in Greece and probably cannot connect, but let's see what happens. And most of you know Darla already. So Professor Darla Deardorff is UNESCO Chair of Intercultural Competence at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. And it's also founder of the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence. Was founded in 2017, right? And this is an incredible community of practitioners, researchers, people working in education, but also in other organizations, and with over 5,000 members. And how many working groups, more or less?
Over 20 different working groups. Yeah.
And over 20. Yeah. So thank you for creating this space where we can learn from each other, from you, with you. So you influence definitely work of a lot of people in the field because you were also working with the Summer Institute of Intercultural Communication in Portland for many, many years, right? So many people know
Correct.
from there. Almost for 20 years, you were executive director of the Association of International Education Administrators. So this is where you probably also did a lot of research. And I definitely will forget something, but your international experience is amazing. And only probably when we would look at your passport, how many stamps you have, and also how many conferences you are like all over the world. So good to see you in so many continents. So I admire your energy. And what I admire most is the generosity of sharing you have, the sensibility you have. And we are going to talk about it during this interview because you made many people cry with your closing words at the last Global Forum. So it was last month, and yeah, it was very touching. So um, let's start with the first question, or if there is something that you would like people to know and I didn't mention, because I didn't mention the Harvard University, the Shanghai International Studies University, so a lot of universities where you are involved or was involved. Is there something you'd like to share with people, what they should know about you?
No, just I think you've done an excellent job. That was more than enough. But yeah, hello to everyone, and it's an honor to be here. And thank you for the invitation, Anna.
Thank you very much. So, because you did a lot of research on intercultural competence, training and development, assessment of intercultural competence, my question is, because there is no effective training and development program without tracking and measuring whether learning outcomes have been achieved. And I remember very well one of your articles when you said we need a change of paradigm in terms of assessment. So can you tell a little bit more about how this competence should be assessed and what do we need?
Sure. So that, yes, assessment of intercultural competence is in one of the areas of my research and work over the quite number of years now. And I'm sure many of you all are aware that there are over 150 different assessment tools that purport to measure intercultural competence or some variation thereof. There are different words that are being used, such as cultural sensitivity or cultural intelligence and so on. And they're widely used, some of these tools. However, in the research, we were finding that a pre and post assessment measure is insufficient.
Hmm.
It can be part of how we assess, but it's insufficient. And moreover, um, the first question we need to ask is not what tool do we use, but what is it that we're trying to assess and why?
Hmm.
And so that's where it's really important, first of all, to know the why. And if it's about improving a program, that's actually a whole different set of skills as in program evaluation.
Hmm.
So for assessment to occur, it's important to understand the why, that it's about improving others' intercultural competence, that this is a lifelong journey that we're all on, and it's a way to provide feedback so that that feedback to the individual becomes very important. Therefore, formative assessment, what is done during a learning experience, becomes more important than the pre and post, before and after. And so the first question then to ask is why? Why do we want to assess? And thinking about how we're going to use it. If we're not going to use it in any way for learner improvement, then why bother, right? Second is to look at what we want to assess. And that's where the overall goals and learning objectives come into play. Goals are too broad to assess. For example, a goal could be to develop intercultural competence. Okay, great. That's a goal. How are we going to get there? That's where we have the learning objectives, the kind of stepping stones, if you will, to reaching that goal. Those learning objectives need to be as concrete and measurable as possible. We're looking at change. What changes do we want to see in a person's knowledge or skills or attitudes? And we want to try to measure that change. And so then we can get to the question of how do we do that? What would be the evidence of change? And so one of the key words I want to leave you with, one of them is evidence. So it's not about tools, it's about evidence and collecting that evidence. And then how do we collect the evidence? It might be through one of those 150 some tools that are out there, but it might be in some other way. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. If we're looking at change at Harvard, there's a whole toolkit on making thinking visible. And one of the tools I use from that is simply to have participants reflect on, I used to think, now I think. That doesn't involve an instrument, but it does look at change and having the participants reflect on what changes have occurred for them. So that's what I mean by a kind of a shifting paradigm, that we're shifting. It's not about the tools, it's about the learner. It's also about co-creating with the learner. What we're seeing now is more about learners saying for themselves what it is that they want to learn, what's the evidence they've learned it, and how will they be able to demonstrate that. So assessment is not something we do to learners, but that we do with them. So that's, again, another whole paradigm shift of how we think about intercultural assessment. So there's a lot more that we're seeing in terms of assessment, including the use of peer assessment, and looking at observable behaviors, and certainly going much more beyond knowledge, because intercultural competence is so much more than that. At the same time, again, I want to come back to the point that this is a lifelong journey for all of us. And so assessing intercultural competence is quite complex, and it's difficult in many ways to do that because of this lifelong process. And also when we look at definitions of intercultural competence, and the one from my research is one of the first research-based definitions and frameworks around intercultural competence. It's, in a nutshell, intercultural competence is behavior and communication that is both effective and appropriate. And those words are really important. Effectiveness means how well did we meet our own goals, and we can know whether we've met our goals or not. Appropriateness is how we met our goals, and that can only be judged and assessed by the others, not ourselves. So that's where assessment of intercultural competence needs to involve a multi-perspective, multi-measure approach. And that's why I started off by saying that one tool is insufficient. So there's a lot in that, and colleagues can find online articles that I've written about some of that if you'd like to know more, and also you're welcome to contact me. I would also mention, since you talked about the World Council, there's a whole working group devoted to assessing intercultural competence. So that would be a great place to connect with others from around the world who are really interested in looking more at the complexities of assessing intercultural competence.
in our conference handbook, you can already find information about the World Council, and so yeah, I highly recommend it. I had the pleasure with Curtis started the assessment group like years ago, and it was great experience. You mentioned many times also the process, how process is important, and yeah, we should do it with learners and not to them. And I think many of us are here because many of us are trainers or facilitators, consultants, and there's this problem with evaluating the outcomes of intercultural training. What I found in the last handbook of intercultural training by Bawuk and Landis is that there is a lack of longitudinal studies, so it's very difficult to track also the progress, right? What I like you didn't mention that you recommended also is the like journaling as a process, right? So something what helps to develop this self-awareness, critical thinking, so all this. And of course, we are not going to ask participants to share their journals with us, right? So to assess how good they did it. But yeah, it could be, it's more.
Well, to your point with the process, reflection does play a really crucial role in the development of intercultural competence and mindfulness practices, being very aware of oneself, and particularly in interactions and reflecting on what worked well, what could I do better next time? What was this like from the other person's perspective, which is often hard to know. But being mindful and reflective throughout our interactions is very important.
And one of the things that you created, for example, as a space for reflection are the story circles. So we will also recommend to join if someone would have the possibility in any moment to have this experience online or on site. So it's definitely a powerful tool.
Sure, and I think participants will hear more about UNESCO Story Circles during this conference, but just for those who haven't heard about it, it's a structured yet adaptable intercultural methodology that UNESCO, part of the United Nations, piloted in all 5 UNESCO regions around the world. And there's an open access manual where you can read all about it in at least 7 different languages. There's also a 2.5-minute introduction video from UNESCO about story circles in 3 different languages. So I encourage colleagues to have a look at that video and to download the manual. And in World Council is the largest group of UNESCO Story Circle facilitators, and we meet quarterly. Our next meeting is coming up in July. All online, and so it's a great place to learn from and with other facilitators of UNESCO Story Circles.
Thank you for creating this tool and for first of all to give it for free to people. So thank you. What do you think, Darla, when you look at the world today? What are the most pressing challenges in the world, but also in the field of intercultural competence education and training? Because it looks like we are doing something wrong or not good enough.
So my motivation for even beginning to research intercultural competence is looking at what's necessary for us to get along together as humans sharing this one planet. And as we can see in the world today, humans are not doing a very good job of getting along together. We have a lot of work to do. And I'm grateful to all those gathered at this conference for working and helping people try to get along better together. So for me, that's the most like burning challenge of all, is that we definitely need to do a better job of that. In fact, one of the quotes that has long inspired me is a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, "We must learn to get along together. It's not an option, and we have to learn it. We must learn to get along together as brothers, as family, or perish together as fools." And I think that is never truer than now. Certainly with all the geopolitical challenges, the increasing divides and polarizations that we're seeing within and across societies. In terms of what is specific perhaps with challenges in the intercultural field, and I'd love to hear others' perspectives on this too. I think it's important that we bring in the elements of social justice and addressing power and inequities that exist, that we need to ensure equitable access to resources, and that intercultural is not just something for a certain group of people, maybe those at universities or in education entities, but intercultural competence is for everyone. And so the challenge is, how do we take this out broadly to everyone? And I think that's remaining a big challenge for all of us. And again, ensuring that equitable access and reaching out to those who might not care about this or would never come across it otherwise. Um, Second, I think it's so important that we learn from silenced voices, from marginalized voices. Um, we need to constantly interrogate whose voices are missing, whose knowledge is being privileged in what we do. And I've become much more aware of this as the UNESCO chairholder on intercultural competence at Stellenbosch in South Africa, because for far too long, voices from the global north have dominated.
Mm.
And I do acknowledge I'm a white woman from the global north. I'm working with an amazing team within South Africa, including two co-chairs, Dr. Davinia Jitu and Dr. Precious Semba, who's actually doing a lot of work and research on Ubuntu,
Mm.
which is perhaps another way that we need to be looking at intercultural competence. And I think we have so much to learn from voices beyond the global north. And ways that we're doing that through the UNESCO chair is that we are having a monthly webinar series featuring African voices and perspectives on intercultural competence, and anyone's welcome to join and be part of that monthly series. And then there's a ICC in Africa working group in the World Council that then a week later, after that webinar, meets with the presenter and has a discussion following up from that webinar. And anyone can join that working group. You don't have to be based in Africa. And then the other way we're trying to identify and elevate African voices and perspectives and practices around intercultural competence is through an in-person intercultural conference each year that rotates around the continent of Africa. We had our inaugural conference in Nairobi this past October, and we're really excited to have our upcoming conference, the second one, at the end of September in Rabat, Morocco. And again, anyone is welcome to come and to learn and to connect with those on the continent who are really doing amazing work from very different perspectives. And it's important that we learn from those perspectives. So certainly that piece is important. And then I would say third is that it's not enough to just have conference, even though I just talked about conference, have conferences on intercultural competence or talk with others about it. But in the end, it comes down to action. What actions are being taken? What differences are being made? And so we need to move from kind of talking with each other to reaching out to those who don't hear about it, and to taking action and actually working together to build a better world.
Yeah, and this is why you know about Elevate, about the European project we are working with, and we are presenting also at this conference, that for us the objective is also to ensure a sustainable learning outcome. But with the sustainable learning outcome, we don't only mean the transfer in the workplace. For me, the sustainable learning is that we go with this skills attitudes beyond workplace, that people who participants of our training programs, they can go to their families, friends, and to the society and become ambassadors of intercultural and global competence. And then I can say, okay, we achieved sustainable learning outcomes, because it goes beyond the workplace or the organization. But often I think there is not even the transfer to the workplace. And I think this is one of the challenges that probably also practitioners are facing, is unfortunately, I would say the quite middle or low sometimes level of skills, knowledge, and competences of trainers and consultants and facilitators. And I think the problem is, and this will be my second question, there is I perceive it as a lack of dialogue between researchers and practitioners, between research and practitioners. Because when we talked before about the access, for example, to the publication, the handbooks that are extremely expensive, but it's not only the price of the book, but sometimes it's also the language. That it takes a lot of time to understand, and you have to switch the register. You have to have this special intellectual capacity to understand what the person was saying. So how do you see, what is your impression about this, what I would call lack of dialogue between researchers and practitioners, especially in business context, but in general? Do you also observe this gap, and how can we facilitate more effective connections between these worlds?
You have rightly identified very much of a gap that's existed for a very long time. And I think for trainers, practitioners, this is sometimes treated as a one-time, and even others who are participating kind of have a tick box mentality of, okay, I've done the training now. But we need to look at this in a much more of a longitudinal, holistic way. That this is, again, lifelong. And so we need to focus on how to embed intercultural competence and work into all that we do, not just okay, we're going to stop, now we're going to do the training, now we're just going to back to normal. But how do we embed this in all that we do? And there has been research around how to do that. It's about having researchers connecting with practitioners around real life intercultural engagement that is supported by intentional reflection and ongoing feedback, which we've already talked about. And I would like to see much more around mentorship. I think mentorship would be a way to bridge that gap. Communities of practice that bring together researchers and practitioners are a way to bridge that gap. And again, World Council is one of the main organizations seeking to bridge those gaps between, not just between practitioners and researchers, but also with policymakers, with students, in different languages, not just English, in different sectors and disciplines. So organizations like the World Council become really important in bridging the gap and looking for opportunities to intentionally connect researchers, practitioners, learners together is very, very important, and we need to do more of that.
And this is exactly our mission at the Academy for Diversity and Innovation. This is what we are doing here during the conference. We have people, we have practitioners, we have researchers, we have people from NGOs, and hopefully some of policymakers also. And this is the idea and the principle of social innovation 4.0 is to connecting these four sectors and creating something, new knowledge or boosting intercultural competence in the society. And I think the problem that we are facing also is the integrity, is the lack of integrity, because it's we don't walk the talk. So sometimes we don't have enough curiosity, or we are not open-minded enough. And I can see it in Elevate. In Elevate, we are 3 universities, 3 consulting companies. And I'm journaling, I'm about my process. And I can see how often I'm kind of biased against research, because I think, oh my God, they need so much time to do it, or they need so much words to say something what they could say in one word, one sentence. And then I realize, okay, calm down. These are kind of different words. And I also know that not everyone like this, like putting people in boxes. Of course, there are researchers who are practitioners. There are a lot of people here in this conference that they are building these bridges. And you are also, even if you are professor with all your titles, publication, and so on, you are also practitioner, because World Council is an example that you created the space, and what you do, it's a lot of practice, and you are one of the person who is really like very integrate person, and you are walking the talk. I really remember one article from George Renwick from the third edition of the Handbook of Intercultural Trainer, that he said that only integrate trainers can deliver integrate programs. So the quote was longer, but it's true that I think that sometimes we just lack this this integrity.
Well, it's interesting. There's an emerging group of people who bridge this gap, and they're called scholar practitioners.
Mm.
And so they're often practitioners who engage in publishing and in research. And in fact, there is a book in the international education field on scholar practitioners and international education. And I have a chapter in that book, along with others, reflecting on how scholar practitioners can indeed bridge this gap. So maybe we need more scholar practitioners
I will ask
in
you
our
later for
area.
all the things, and we will put it in the handbook so people can see the references. And my last question, the topic of the global forum was shared humanity. How what are the principles? So how do you understand it, and how this shared humanity can drive truly transformative collaboration and innovation in diverse teams and communities?
I was thrilled to see that the organizing committee of the most recent Global Forum of the World Council had chosen months ago the theme of our shared humanity, because they wanted to have all of us think about the bigger picture, kind of the bigger why we do what we do. And then, of course, with what's happened in just the last few months, that theme has become even more compelling, to think about our shared humanity. And at the heart of shared humanity, and UNESCO would say this too, is respect, that we value each other as fellow humans, especially those who don't think like we do or believe what we do or look like we do. And within that respect is recognition of our common
Mm.
dignity and worth and interdependence as human beings. And I mentioned earlier about Ubuntu. Ubuntu doesn't just look at the individual the way we often do in the global north. And in fact, even from my framework from the research, it's all premised on the individual, knowledge, skills, and attitudes of the individual. Ubuntu rather looks at that interdependence and emphasizes that. And it says, I am because we are because I am, that there's no way to separate the individual from the group, from humanity. And so I think we can learn a lot from some of those different perspectives. Some of the principles, as I mentioned, respect as a cornerstone, but also humility of recognizing that we still have so much to learn and that each of us only knows a small bit. And so we need to continue every day to be curious and to learn more. It's also important principle around openness, open-mindedness, and then embracing solidarity together, that as humans, we have shared struggles and challenges together, particularly the global challenges that face all of us, that we have shared human experience. Interestingly, I just heard a talk where it said the one piece that shows up in every culture, I haven't looked into this to verify, but is that of marriage, of two people coming together. Um, of course, the ways that manifests itself is different all over the world, but we all have those shared human experiences, right? And so we need to remember that we are indeed interconnected, that we have a mutual desire for safety and justice and a meaningful life. And so for me, that kind of puts together a bigger picture of why we do what we do. UNESCO is very big on emphasizing our shared humanity, and that involves kind of the willingness to engage deeply with each other in ways that we might not do. That's what I love about UNESCO Story Circles, that allows for that deeper engagement. And I think true transformation can occur then when we embrace that openness and curiosity and learning from and with each other, and recognizing that, again, this is a lifelong journey. And we all need to embrace our shared humanity.
The genuine curiosity, and you are talking about it in your model of intercultural competence, the importance of curiosity also is one of the most important attitudes. Darla, I could stay for longer if you. It would be lovely, and I know we have to finish. Thank you. Even if you cannot be with us in Wrocław, I hope you will be with us in Malaga. You will get the invitation very soon. This is a spoiler. There will be the next conference in autumn in Malaga. So then I hope to hug you and meet you in person and say thank you, because with the World Council, you also created a space when we can feel that we belong. And this is one of these needs that you mentioned also before. We need is one of the basic needs of humanity is belonging, and you created
Yes.
this community. So thank you on behalf of all members. Thank you very much, and enjoy your time in Greece. And if there is something else you would like to say to participants of our conference.
Thank you so much for our conversation today. And I would love to stay in touch with participants. And I'm on LinkedIn and in World Council. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to connect and learn from and with each other. So thank you again so much.
Definitely. Thank you very much.